Toyota Material Handling is now providing a factory rebate of up to $2,500 when you trade in a Toyota or a competitive unit. Now, through September 30th, 2024, trade in your forklift and get a new industry-leading Toyota forklift. This rebate applies to electric and internal combustion models. Unlock your upgrade today by visiting toyotaforklift.com. That's toyotaforklift.com, or click the link in the show notes.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Evan Shelley. He's the co-founder and CEO of Truck Parking Club, which I've been seeing all over the place, going crazy. And they're focused on the problem around truck parking within the country and the shortage and lack thereof of truck parking. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about Truck Parking Club, where the idea came about, what they do to help with this problem. And we're also going to talk about the impact that it has on the warehouse operator and how that impacts the warehousing industry itself, because we know that the warehousing industry and trucking industry are tied together. So, Evan, welcome to the show today. How are you?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Doing well.
Definitely happy to get you on here. Happy to learn more about this. So tell us a little bit about kind of, I guess, your background and how that kind of led up to the idea of Truck Parking Club and what Truck Parking Club is.
Yeah, so my background, went to school for civil engineering, and that led to me taking a construction site development job soon out of college. And from there, was always very interested in real estate. I had bought a couple rental properties and decided after about 18 months or so out of college, hey, I'm going to go out on my own and flip houses and do real estate deals. And so I went out and figured it out in Florida and started flipping houses. And ultimately that turned into flipping large scale commercial and industrial land deals. And from doing those commercial industrial land deals, I came across a property that was a good fit for truck parking. Ultimately did not do truck parking on the site because the municipality wouldn't support it, although it was zoned industrial. So that was back in 2021. And everyone was telling me there's a huge need for more truck parking. The municipality was saying, we're not going to support it. And then it was like, what's going on here? What's going on with this truck parking? And so in 2021 started talking to a lot of stakeholders in truck parking and transportation, carriers, just people in the industry that understood the problem. And ultimately, through a lot of conversations, a lot of testing, instead of going out and building more truck parking, came up with the Truck Parking Club model, two-sided marketplace model, where you go out and just add a bunch of locations that are suitable for truck parking. And that's kind of my background and where it all really started.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting journey there from flipping houses to truck parking now, and kind of seeing that need in the market and the opportunity there. And I mean, tell us a little bit about, Truck Parking Club. If my understanding is, it's like kind of like a little bit of a Airbnb almost for truck parking, in a sense. Like it's a way to find parking, and also a way for people that have space to be able to put that on kind of in a marketplace. Is that correct?
Yeah. The easiest way to explain it, and majority of people understand, is just the Airbnb of truck parking. So we help truckers find and reserve parking through our website and mobile app, and we help property owners and businesses monetize their extra space suitable for truck parking. And we do all that through a self-service model, just like Airbnb. You can go onto our website or mobile app anytime and find and reserve parking. We have 392 locations as of today, and we add 2 to 3 new locations every single day. But yeah, it's, traditional marketplace, two-sided marketplace, connecting
Mm.
locations suitable for truck parking and connecting them with truckers and making it easy for drivers to find and reserve it. And I guess the key thing to point out is it's not just taking existing truck parking and putting it on our marketplace. It's also taking trucking companies' yards, tow truck companies' yards, truck repair shops, CDL schools, warehouses, any location that's currently suitable for truck parking. And maybe there are trucks parking there, but they're not in the business of truck parking. So they're not offering up their property as publicly available for, a driver or carrier to go in and rent spots out in that yard.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's such like a value add there, because I feel like there's like space out there that could be potentially used for that, but like the people don't know how to necessarily leverage it or go through the process to make that happen. It sounds like you're making that easier for them to be able to do. And obviously it sounds like you're growing that. The amount of space is like a lot here. You said you're adding like 2 to 3 new locations a day, which is very interesting. And so I mean, tell us a little bit about kind of like what is the, you mentioned there's some challenges with some municipalities and things like that, but I mean, kind of define for us like the issue here. I mean, how big is this truck parking issue? I mean, is there really like a huge shortage in terms of places to park your truck?
Yeah, you can look around at the various associations, and all of them have a different idea of how severe the shortage is. And I would definitely say there is a shortage, right? Especially when capacity is going to certain areas all at the same time, when there's that creates these huge constraints in certain markets. Think like Southern California, Inland Empire, up in the Northeast, around Newark, around the port. I mean, and South Florida is one of the worst in the U.S. There's constant constraints in those areas, and sometimes they're worse than others. But as we both know, loads move and trucks and trailers move. And so some areas can be severely constrained, and then the next week they can be less constrained. But ultimately there is a shortage, but the numbers vary. I've seen 600,000 space shortage. I've seen 40,000 space shortage. So it's probably somewhere in the middle. But if you go build 100,000 spaces in the middle of Texas, that's not going to really help the shortage, right? So it's really, bringing capacity to areas that really need it. But also on top of that, it's not just a truck parking shortage. There's a truck parking awareness shortage. If you don't know there's available space for you 2 miles down the road, there's nowhere to find it except the third page on Google. Like it's highly likely you're not going to find it until you drive past it. And so drivers spend a lot of time just driving around looking for parking. So there is a truck parking shortage, in my opinion, but there's also a truck parking awareness shortage. And really, through our model, we take care of both those things. We create more parking by leveraging existing parking in our technology, and we also ultimately bring more awareness to availability around you. So, there's a decent number of truck parking companies out there at this point, which is awesome, and they're building more, creating more parking, more in a traditional sense. But even if they're doing that, and let's say they're just not getting the awareness, like we have tens of thousands of drivers looking for parking on a weekly basis on our app and website. And if they don't have that awareness, right? If they don't have that visibility, I guess I should say, there's potentially thousands of drivers that need those spaces that just, they're not seeing them for whatever reason. They're not getting, exposure to them from whatever source they're using to find their parking. So it's a really interesting problem that we've spent, obviously a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, interesting. And I think it's interesting you mentioned the awareness around the parking itself. I mean, I think that's such a big thing too, because I think about, I live in New Jersey. You mentioned around Newark there. I'm down in like central South Jersey, and there's tons of truck traffic around here because we have a ton of warehouses and things like that. And there are like, I mean, kind of since I've become aware of like truck parking club and stuff? Or like noticing more like, oh, there's parking here, parking there. But it is not something like that you see like where it's like heavily advertised or something. I mean, aside from like maybe a truck stop where they have like some locations there, like, but people that have like a lot or a yard where, you know, they can do some parking, like it's not something that's very prevalent or even like noticed from the road in some aspects. So I think creating that awareness is such a great thing. And I'm curious too, I mean, is there a difference in shortages around like places where people just need like short-term parking, like in overnight type of thing versus like long-term storage parking? I mean, is there much of a difference there? Is there a shortage on both ends?
You know, I would say we built the business on the idea of really focusing on helping to solve the shortage on the overnight and daily truck parking. And as we continue to grow, we continue executing on that, but we also see these interesting trends. Since we're fully self-service app, like our customers use us how they need to use us. We don't broker parking and tell them, well, we got 3 spaces available over here. You got to take it for 4 days or whatever. We're not cutting deals. We're, you know, making the supply available. And then what we call trucker members are then deciding, you know, I'm going to use this spot for 24 hours. I'm going to use this spot for 4 days, whatever the case may be. And so we identify these really unique trends. And there's definitely a problem in the multi-day spaces, not just overnight, you know, where you see the drivers parked on the on-ramp and off-ramp. There's definitely issues with multi-day dropping trailers where drivers are seriously constrained for supply. And what does that do? If you know, especially in a smaller carrier, if they can't find parking in a certain area for the period of time they need to deliver those loads, pick up the loads, have a reset, they just won't take those loads, even if, you know, it could make them significantly more money, because they just don't want the stress that it's going to put on themselves, whether they're the, you know, owner of the company or it's their drivers. They're just like, we hear it all the time. I just left a truck show in Kodak, Tennessee by Gatlinburg, and we just hear it all the time where drivers are like, no, I don't go to the Northeast. I can't ever find a place to park. It's always a disaster up there getting in and out. That's how we hear drivers say it all the time. It's a disaster getting in and out of there. And what they're saying is, I just can never find, I'm going to stay stressed the entire time because I have no confidence in parking, and I have no confidence on when I'm going to get that load. And if I can't find parking, you know, it's just going to turn into a huge mess that could cost me more money than it makes me by going and getting a load there. So to answer your question, I think there is a problem in the overnight, but there is a problem in the multi-day. And of course, you know, I mean, money flows where there's opportunity, and you see a lot of these funds that are, you know, like Industrial Outdoor Ventures. There's 5 or 6 of them, JDN, Zenith, that invest more in this long-term storage thing. And obviously there's some type of constraint there. They wouldn't be investing that much money in it. So I think there is some constraints in the long-term storage as well, which we do monthly parking, but they'll store anything on their properties, not just truck parking. But it's an interesting thing to like sit and ponder about, to be honest, and just think about the truck parking market and the industrial outdoor storage market.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I think it's, you know, pretty remarkable too, to see kind of like you just mentioned that, you know, a lot of drivers are saying like they won't even bother to come to the Northeast because they have this challenge, right? And it's going to cost them more than they're actually going to make. And, you know, they're going to be stressed the entire time and all these things. So, I mean, I'm curious on that regard. I mean, you know, if you see, like, I'm in the Northeast, I'm in New Jersey, and, you know, there's warehouses everywhere, but like if you're seeing less drivers or less desire for drivers to even want to come and service like in the Northeast, I mean, how does that end up impacting like the warehouse operator, right? I mean, how does that end up impacting just the supply chain in general?
We'll be back after a quick break.
When it comes to systems, you want something that will start showing results fast. You're looking for a tool that can enable your 3PL or warehouse to get to the next level. So why wait? That's why Carton Cloud provides supported, fast onboarding that can have your WMS up and running in hours, not months. Jump into Carton Cloud's easy-to-use workflows for all of your services, including cross-docking, serialized inventory tracking, e-commerce order fulfillment, and more. This software is built by logistics people for logistics people, and those logistics people are standing by to help train you and support you so that you can be successful with your customer. With 24/7 real-time reporting and free online training, you need to check out Carton Cloud for your operation. Take the next step in your operation by heading to cartoncloud.com/free-demo or click the link in the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super interesting thing. Ultimately, I think it ends up costing everyone money.
Yeah.
From the consumer all the way back, it costs everyone money if drivers don't have an adequate place to park and they're spending a bunch of time looking for parking, and maybe they don't have a place to park when they're waiting to load or unload. And that creates a lot of constraints on the shipper in the warehouse. So it really, I think, affects every part of the supply chain, and ultimately creates additional costs that, I would say a decent amount of gets passed to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a super interesting thing talking with warehouses and shippers about, a lot of them, as I'm sure very familiar, don't want to park trucks on their property.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of goes back to the same thing. They don't want the headaches that they think comes with it, which is understandable. I think what we've done a good job of is going to warehouses and shippers and saying, well, it's not actually that complicated and you don't have to hire anyone, because we've just automated the entire thing from booking through customer service, through billing, through payment to, the warehouse. We really automated that entire thing. But, a lot of warehouses are like, I don't want that additional stress.
Yeah.
I don't want that additional work on my team. And what we have to do is educate them like, no, it's really not. And you're giving space to these drivers that severely have a huge need for it, may not have any hours left on their clock, or even if they do, they don't know where to go. So they end up parking, on the really probably in the street of the distribution center of the industrial park. I mean, which is, I'm sure you've seen it a million times, because they just don't know where to go. And there isn't any, they're not aware of where to go. But if that warehouse would become more open-minded and say, well, I've got 10 spaces back here, I'll open these up, let Truck Parking Club, or they could do it in-house if they wanted to, and put themselves in the truck parking business. It's, and ultimately they make some money on it, but also I would suspect they would actually have less stress because they know they'll park 10 trucks in the back. If there's availability back there and they're having an issue loading, unloading, a driver has no hours left, you allocate one of those spaces to that driver, and hopefully that relieves stress for all parties, right?
Yeah.
Involved, the carrier, the warehouse, etc.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it is something because I've, worked in warehouses before and, been a manager, and there's been certainly times where there's just space in the yard, and it's kind of we're not doing anything with this. What could we do with this? But then, like you said, then it comes up well, what's the administrative work behind trying to manage something like this? Is there, security implications and all these different types of things? But I think there's something to be said there about, reducing the overall stress and friction around that. And, whether it's drivers that are servicing you and, giving them a good option, to create a better relationship in that sense, or just drivers in general. But I'm curious too. I mean, when we talk about these spaces, like you mentioned, maybe there's 10 spaces that a warehouse could offer up or something like that. And depending on the volume they have, maybe it fluctuates how much is available for some overnight parking or something like that. But I mean, I mean, how much like additional value could that potentially drive for the business? I mean, I imagine that, a parking rate in the Northeast versus parking rate in Texas or something might be different. But I mean, is there like actual real significant value that they could realize for their business from leveraging that real estate that otherwise is not doing anything for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. I think, yeah, and I'll speak in terms of Truck Parking Club because I'm just very familiar with it.
Yeah.
If they leverage Truck Parking Club and did parking in their lot, let's say it's 10 extra spaces, I believe, and we've seen it with warehouses we work with, that ultimately they're going to make money, right? They're going to monetize it. It's not any additional work on their team that's at the warehouse because we've automated the entire thing for them. And if Truck Parking Club does a good job at educating that warehouse on what we do and show them examples of where we do it and show them examples of there is no additional work on you, that we take care of everything, including customer service, I think ultimately they make more money. There's less stress, especially in situations where they have drivers that are maybe in a situation where they can't leave. And instead of just forcing them to leave and creating tension between the warehouse workers and the driver, they just say, yeah, go over there and book a space. We've got, 10 spaces allocated. It looks like there's 2 spaces left over there. You can book a space. I think it would just create a lot of pluses. I mean, you see companies out there like, for example, Doc 411. I don't know if you're familiar or involved with them or anything, but that's just an example. First thing that came to my mind is, one of the biggest questions I've spoken with them, and one of the biggest questions is like, do they have parking or not? And it becomes this whole thing. And ultimately, I would suspect the more value you can provide to drivers that come through there, the better reviews you're going to get. The more desire there is going to be to take loads there. I mean, it's kind of a cascading positive effect. So ultimately, I'm biased, but I think it could be a big positive for a warehouse. I don't think it probably doesn't work for every warehouse, but I think there is definitely some percentage of warehouses that could definitely benefit from using us, and we have some that do. I think it's the biggest hurdle is just educating them that, hey, we can automate this whole thing for you, and you can provide some value to drivers that come to your location.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see the value there. And I think, a lot of times too, we see, these warehouses, they're like built kind of just on spec, right? And, they put in a big yard, and then, the warehouse space itself makes sense for the company, but the company doesn't really need all that yard space, right? So how can they do something, different there, maybe to offset like their lease cost or something like that? I mean, I think there's definitely value that can be driven there. And along the lines too of, kind of the shipper and the trucker kind of interactions, and like you said, reducing some of that tension or stress overall can make the relationship better. I know you had spent some time on the road in a truck after Manifest with Chris Thomas, right, as well. And I'm curious, I mean, as you kind of went along with him, I was following as you guys were kind of posting about that on LinkedIn, but I mean, where do you see where there could be like additional improvements between like the shipper and trucker in terms of like that relationship? Because I know sometimes there's like friction around that relationship, and I'm just curious, like, what do you see out there? Like, where could there be some improvements, or maybe some things that you saw that were really good?
Yeah. So, I was out there for 8 days. I think we delivered 3 or 4 loads. Chris drives a pneumatic tanker, so we got to go to some pretty unique spots. We went to one location way out in Wyoming, dropping off some grain. And I think I got educated on the fact that there's so much like dwell time at these locations. It's pretty amazing. Easily sit there for an hour or two. And obviously, there are things that Chris was working on paperwork wise while waiting, but I was just like, man, there's a lot of inefficiency there. But I mean, that's problem has been worked on, being tackled, for decades at this point, and continues to get better. But ultimately, and I also think I was amazed that, like, I'm just bringing it back to truck parking. Like, rarely do they have any truck parking. You're parked in just like some random part of their location. You're just kind of like squeezing on the side somewhere. It's not like they have like 4 spots for their drop offs. It's like you're either in a line or you're parked like it's, best out of the way as possible. And you're like, wow, this is interesting that there just wasn't that much thought put into it. And Chris is unique because he drives a tanker, but I would suspect it's, not all that much different across a lot of the warehouses. But I guess my point being, a lot of it is just improvised. All right. It's just like you drive into the site, they're telling me I got 2 hours, I'm going to pull over here out of the way the best I can. Just super interesting in that regard. And I guess as well, we were out there 8 days, and I think 3 of the days we used a truck parking club location. One of the nights, we got very lucky to find a parking spot. That was a wild experience.
Yeah.
Veteran, 19 years driving on the road, and we struggled. We got really lucky that we found a spot back behind an old mom and pop restaurant. But that was eye-opening too. Just like, a veteran, 19 years on the road, and still can get caught in that situation where there isn't any available parking around you. So that was really eye-opening as well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, I think it's crazy to think too, because I think about it like, and I see too, like you mentioned the parking on the on and off ramps, and certain places around my area where I see people in there, at the nighttime, like they're pulled off and they're just lined up like on the shoulder basically. But I think it's interesting. Like I can imagine, you're looking for parking, and you already have been driving for how long that day, and now like you're driving around trying to find a place just to park can become pretty frustrating and stressful in some instances, which does definitely could boil over into that shipper drop off too, and make that relationship a little challenging. But I mean, I think it's really great thing that you're trying to bring more awareness around this and try to leverage some more parking for these truckers to be able to reduce that stress and make it easier for them to find these locations to do that type of thing. So very interesting stuff that you're up to there, Evan, and really interesting to learn about Truck Parking Club and just this overall problem out there around the parking itself. And hopefully you guys will continue to make a dent in that, and then hopefully improve it and continue to grow as well. So very great to talk to you today. And if people are interested in learning more about Truck Parking Club, whether it's from the perspective of a driver that wants to utilize the tool, or maybe a warehouse operator that's looking to potentially leverage space that they have for parking, what's the best way to find out more information about Truck Parking Club?
Yeah, so we have a ton of good information and videos on truckparkingclub.com. Right there on the homepage, there's a couple videos that educate you on Truck Parking Club. There's also some articles that will educate you on Truck Parking Club. We really have everything there. And if you want to check us out on the socials, it's in the footer of truckparkingclub.com. All the icons, whatever socials you like to be on, we're pretty much on all of them. And we put out a lot of content about what we do, and also just a decent amount of just interesting, funny content that ties back the best we can to truck parking. But that's it. It's really all on truckparkingclub.com. Obviously, if you want to reach out to me, you can go to LinkedIn, Evan K. Shelley, and shoot me a message on there. But yeah, truckparkingclub.com is going to be your best bet for educating yourself.
All right, great. I will definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So, Evan, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.